Today on Locked On Dolphins, we're having some fun with numbers and looking at the Tyreek Hill contract, given what may or may not happen with him this upcoming offseason.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The timeline is aflame, as it has been since the end of the season, on what direction the Dolphins need to take with number 10. And Tyreek Hill, obviously the saga at the end of the season with the decision effectively not to play after the first possession of the second half against the Jets. The post-game media availability, the messaging from Drew Rosenhaus on the Pat McAfee show, the messaging from Chris Greer in the final press availability of the season from the Dolphins Brain Trust. There's a lot of different bits of information that have fans feeling a lot of different kinds of things, and the conversation about whether or not this team should trade Tyreek Hill, but he's one of the best players on the team, and how could you move on from somebody like that, especially with the pressure to win. And I just wanted to look at the Tyreek Hill contract as a whole, as it exists, what we know based off of the public reporting of the contract from cap resources like overthecap.com, spottrack.com. The NFLPA puts out a daily cap report that kind of underlined an accounting discrepancy between the two places, but the NFLPA's cap report seems to suggest one of them is right. What that means for prorated money within the contract, what the cash schedule looks like for when Tyreek's due to get what's guaranteed. And some of that gets pretty interesting, right? Because some of that, you consider they reworked the contract in August of this year, and it was announced as a new, air quotes, new 3-year, $90 million contract. So Tyreek got a reallocation of cash up into 2024 to get a cash raise. But the way that they structured some of what came afterwards is just very convenient for a situation that, frankly, hit the fan. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the fallout from a pivot if the team were to move on, kind of get more into some of the nuts and bolts of why my opinion is what it is for this team. But first, you need to define what's left. So I have, courtesy of overthecap.com, courtesy of spottrack.com, effectively what remains on the Tyreek Hill contract. And he has 2 seasons left to play, with his compensation in 2025 fully guaranteed, plus an additional $11 million of 2026 compensation that guarantees of March of 2026. So that really is secondary whether Tyreek plays this year or next year. Anyway, the team would have a decision to make after 2025 to the tune of $11 million in guarantees that guarantees at a later date. But what you need to know is Tyreek is currently scheduled for a $10 million base salary in 2025. That is guaranteed, fully guaranteed. Someone will pay him that, whether it's the Dolphins or somebody else. He also has a roster bonus, according to spottrack.com, of $1 million. And that is reportedly due, according to SpotTrack, on March 14th of 2025. And then he also has next year a total of a $15.85 million option bonus, which is like a signing bonus or like a restructure bonus, but it's automatically prorated out across however many dummy years you need to create the maximum amount of cap space. And that to me is where this contract gets interesting. That 15.85, according to Spottrack.com, is not due until the end of August. So you would obviously do something like this with the intention of, we want to prorate and create a smaller salary cap hit so that we are on a more direct pathway to being salary cap compliant, and you're operating within a cap to cap ratio. And a couple of really successful general managers like Eric DeCosta of the Baltimore Ravens has talked about this with Adam Brenneman and said, we aspire on any given year to be, from a cash spend perspective, between the 6th and 10th highest cash spend team in the league, because that gives you a window to be competitive. So from a Tyreek Hill's perspective, what you need to know is you're looking at what is effectively, between the roster bonus, the option bonus, the salary that he's due, it's about $28.65 million in cash he is owed for 2025. Part of the concern with the Dolphins is the debt ratio and prorated amount of cap is something that the Dolphins have been very aggressive with over the last couple of years. And that by continuing, if you continue with Tyreek Hill and you pay him another, effectively $16 million and you prorate that out, you're only accounting for $3.17 million of that against the cap in 2025. And the rest goes into future years, which has been the thing that has been kind of accumulating as the Dolphins have tried to be aggressive. And if this team is going to be a team that is under some degree of a transition this upcoming year, that kind of stuff's not super sustainable. And that's where you get into the big contract decisions that the team has to make. They have to make a decision on what to do with Tyreek Hill. They have to make a decision on Terron Armstead, presuming Terron Armstead does not make the decision for them. They have to make a decision on what to do with Bradley Chubb as a big contract that has prorated dollars and more cash that is scheduled to be paid. Then, of course, there's the Tua Tagovailoa contract extension. And do you touch that contract at all? Do you pull that lever for more salary cap space, knowing full well that you're prorating dollars into the future? Like, these are all individual decisions, but they're also somewhat intertwined. And I think the Dolphins would benefit from a cap depth perspective to probably transition from at least one, if not two, of the big contracts on the books. That's Terron Armstead, that's Bradley Chubb, and that's Tyreek Hill. I don't think a quarterback upgrade is going to fall out of the sky that would allow you to make that pivot at that spot. As much as people want to throw dirt on Tua Tagovailoa, and the durability is a big time problem, in a lot of ways, I think he's continuing to be a refining and improving player, and finding an upgrade where the Dolphins are picking in the stratosphere that they're at, for better or for worse. Whether you like Tua, you're pro Tua, you're never Tua, you're whatever camp you fall in, I think that's going to be a challenge this offseason with the assets the team has. Which leaves the other three names as far as, are you transitioning away from 0, 1, 2, or 3 of them? But what strikes me the most about this contract, and we're going to get into it next year on the show, is the cash schedule for 2025, given the fact that this contract was reworked in August before any of this stuff did hit the fan. We're looking at that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Therapy is a game changer. It can help you to manage stress, improve your sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. And that's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, making therapy easier for you to find, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your own home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans. And for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of Locked On Dolphins, you can get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for yourself. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80. So I'm going to pull this contract back up if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, no worries. We're going to talk through it. $15.85 million that is not scheduled to be paid out until the end of August next year. Why would you do that? Why would you back last August? Was it because it was just happened to be like a year from when you did the deal? When most option bonuses trigger and are paid when the league year starts, you either proactively do it or you have it all lumped into base salary, and then you make a decision on when the league year starts or right before the league year starts, and choose to how to move the money around in how it's categorized and in what fashion in which it's paid to become salary cap compliant. So it's interesting to me that they split base salary and option bonus in the first place, and were proactive in doing so. That, if you looked at that on its surface level, you could say, well, maybe the team would want to effectively pay for a buyout and pay the option bonus, and then you could trade Tyreek Hill, and the salary another team takes on is dramatically reduced, and it makes life a lot easier for that team to acquire Tyreek Hill, and maybe you get a better return. But if you were going to do that when you structure the contract, you would not have structured the $15.85 million option bonus to be paid at the end of August. You would do it in March and then potentially set yourself up to pay the lump sum, which is effectively your buyout, your theoretical buyout. And then another team, you could come calling and say, hey, Tyreek Hill, the rest of the years do $10 million. Are you interested? I do think it's interesting that they have a roster bonus and they have a option bonus that are two totally separate things that are due about 5.5 months apart. So according to Spot Rack, Tyreek's going to get a $1 million bonus to be on the roster on March 14th when the league year opens. It may behoove the Dolphins, if they are serious about moving on from Tyreek Hill, to be in a position to not have to pay that. The league year technically starts on the 12th. Legal tampering opens on the 10th. The league year starts on the 12th. And that Friday is when Tyreek is his roster bonus is due. So the Dolphins do have a couple-day window at the beginning of the league year if they were going to move on from Tyreek, where they could save themselves this $1 million roster bonus as well. But the fact that it was last August and you pushed, so you're not talking about a theoretical buyout option. You bought yourself the wiggle room for the classification of the cap, because if this was $15.85 million instead of $3.17 per season, you're talking about a $41 million cap hit, $41.38 or $378 million cap hit versus what it is, which is $28.698 million. So you categorize the money in a certain way with a deferment schedule to reduce the salary cap hit to make it easier for you to be compliant when the league year opens. But then you committed to not having to write the check until the end of August, which gives you an extended period before, other than $1 million on March 14th, you don't have to pay any of that other cash out. So it feels less like a buyout option to make him a more attractive player to trade for, and instead gives you a longer runway to trade the established full amount of what he is owed in the 2025 offseason. And the fact that this was done last August is the part that makes you feel like we've heard this team likes to talk about flexibility and having a lot of different directions and having options with all of the maneuvers in which they make. That's what this strikes me as is, hey, we're going to move money up for Tyreek. We're going to give you guarantees for 2025. But our out is your big lump sum check. You got to wait till right before the league year to get it. Because if things don't work out, we want to move on from Tyreek Hill. We don't want to be stuck holding the bag. And we don't want to pay you a bunch of your money for next year for you to go play for somebody else. That's what it strikes me as, knowing how most contracts pay out the cash when they do things like this to manipulate the salary cap. And then maybe it's, hey, we think it's going to work. Hey, stuff hits the fan in season next year. And then now the salary is $10 million if you traded him in season in 2025. If things made a hard left turn at Albuquerque or whatever, and things go disastrously bad. So when you talk about contract structure and how you write the contract and why dates and cash schedule are important, these are the kinds of things that you can kind of see to say, okay, they at least have had some level of acknowledgement of wanting to have multiple exit avenues out of this contract in various stops along the offseason. And maybe you gloss things over with Tyreek and you want to make it work, and then you get to camp and he's really not happy, and you kind of know you're going to be stuck holding the bag here. I don't think there's any world in which Tyreek Hill is cut, because then you're paying him his full guarantees no matter what. And he's a good enough player. People talk about Tyreek and whether he's slowing down or not. Still a really, really, really good football player. Still capable of playing at an extremely high level. He would have a market for somebody, whether that's at $10 million or whether that's at $28 million in cash that he's owed. The good news for Miami is they have between now and the end of August to determine whether they're going to keep him under contract before there's real cash implications, where most teams, when they have an option that's due or an option bonus, it is due to be paid out in March. And then it's kind of like, well, now we already paid him. We really can't trade him. Or if we do, we're conceding and taking a big L on that front. Because when you consider the cap ramifications for paying the option bonus and then trading the player, now your cash to cap ratio, you're continuing to prorate additional cap out in the future years while still increasing your cash burn. And that's like the worst of both worlds. So what would it look like if you moved on, when you moved on, or whatever? We're going to get into that next. You're on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite teams or looking to add a little extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $300 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Right now, Philly favored -6.5 at home against the Commanders. The Chiefs favored against the Bills by 1.5. And I talked with Joe Marino for Locked On NFL Scouting. He's the host of Locked On Bills. I also do Locked On Dolphins. Joe said there's 3 fan bases that are rooting against the Chiefs, are rooting for the Chiefs in this game. It's Chiefs fans, it's Dolphins fans, and it's Jets fans. And anybody else other than that is riding hard on Bills plus 1.5, and hopefully Bills on the money line from their perspective. I will be hoping and rooting for the Chiefs, but they're favored by 1.5 at home. Visit FanDuel.com, join today. Get started with that $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So you have a couple different scenarios here. And with what Tyreek Hill is owed in 2026, which $11 million of that guarantees in March of 2026, plus effectively a $30 million base salary, a $5 million option bonus, and then a per game active bonus of a total of $1 million across the season. I mean, you're talking $36 million in new cash for 2026. No matter what happens with Tyreek Hill from here, I can't imagine $36 million Tyreek Hill, another year older, is something that the Dolphins would sign themselves up for. And probably nobody that acquires Tyreek Hill if you do trade him either. Because none of the money does guarantee if you were to absorb his contract until March of 2026, he'd probably get cut. So anybody that's trading for him is potentially a one-year rental with effectively an option bonus that, if he plays well in 2025 with a new team, they could keep that as the framework for the cash that he's owed with a new signing bonus and give him a new extension. And that's really the game that a lot of young players, when they get up into the later chapters of their career, are aspiring to, is that they want to get as many new contracts as they can because it keeps re-upping to keep up with the market growth rate, and it keeps up with the cash flow, and it keeps you adding more years of guaranteed salary to your ledger. But I can't imagine a world that exists in which the roster bonus that is not guaranteed that he's owed, the per game bonus, or any of the $29.9 million base salary that he's owed would be things that you see the Dolphins paying for in 2026. So if you remove that from the equation, you're left with the $1 million roster bonus on 314, guaranteed. The $10 million base salary this year, and then the $15.85 million option bonus that's due at the end of March, or at the end of August. Everything else from a cap perspective that's on the books is money that's already been paid out to Tyreek Hill. There's dollars from when he did his initial deal with the team, to the tune of, after they've restructured the last couple of years, it's over $12.5 million in prorated money from his original signing bonuses that's due in 25 and 26, and then $1.4 million in 27 and 28. I mean, it's a significant amount of money that's been deferred. It's about $28 million worth. And that's where, when you get into, if you move on from Tyreek Hill and you get somebody that takes the whole thing, if you trade him before March 14th, the $1 million roster bonus goes away. The proration on the $15 million or $16 million option bonus goes away, and the base salary goes away. You would be left with a grand total of $28.297 million in salary cap. All of that would go away. Or all of that would be the cash that was prorated from the past 3 years with Tyreek Hill. You would that's break even with the cap that you're currently scheduled to take on effectively. And the nice thing about doing that is then all of the prorated dollars from future years goes away, and you're saving what's a total of $52 million in cap space in 2026. Obviously, if you just paid the roster bonus at the end of March, you add $1 million to what is owed, and now you're losing about $1,750,000 in cap space if you moved on versus what you're currently scheduled to carry this year for Tyreek Hill, but you traded him after March 14th of 2025. If you waited until the season, though, this is where it gets pretty ugly. Because say you get to September 1st and Tyreek Hill says, guys, it's not going to work. I'm not going to play for you. You could get rid of the $10 million base salary, but you'll have already paid the $15.85 million. You'll have paid the March 14th $1 million roster bonus. Now, it would be a post-June 1st trade. So you'd end up saving $10 million against the cap this year. And then your 2026 dead cap is equal to $28.25 million in cap space, which is a little less than half of what you're currently scheduled to carry. So your big year's worth of dead cap would be 2026. Where this conversation goes for me is, what can you get for Tyreek Hill with the cash schedule that he's currently owed if somebody's taking on paying him $27.5 million in cash? Because if that's a reasonable asset based off of trade precedent, which is probably the equivalence of a second round pick, which is what I would expect to get for Tyreek, and you can get that to add to your roster this year, I do think there's benefit there to just taking the lumps with the salary cap, prorating everything or accelerating all of the dead money, whether that's this year and next year, $12.7 million. And then the years after that is just a handful, $1.4 million per season. All of that accelerates into this year, and it's $28.29 million. You take all that on, you get the $52 million cleared off the books in 2026. And if you have to wait in between March 15th, when you've already paid him $1 million, and the draft, what's $1 million when you're already talking about $28 million in dead money? What's the difference of 28.29 or $29.29 million in dead cap? So I don't think the $1 million roster bonus is a hard deadline for the Dolphins. And I don't think that you've got a hard deadline even when you get to March or September 1st and this cash gets paid out, provided you get a decent pick back, but you have to now wait until 2026 to spend the asset you're getting back to trade Tyreek Hill. And it's at the cost of another $16 million in cash out of your pocket. So I know there's some folks that cover this team. There's a lot of folks that are really smart that cover this team. If your focus is cash and what's the cash burn and how are you prorating the cash? If you trade Tyreek and your cash that he's owed this year goes to zero and you accelerate all of the cap that's prorated out and put it into this year, you're now starting fresh in 2026 with the tune of $52 million in cap space and what is effectively equal to let's not spend another $27.5 million in cash, which we're only going to really take on 40% of and prorate the other 60%. And that number for proration goes even higher. This is a lot of cap economics, fine print, conversation type stuff. And I'd like to be very clear, trading Tyreek Hill does not make you a more talented football team. But I think they got bigger fish to fry than figuring out how talented they are, because they've had talent the last few years. Not necessarily in all the right spots or the spots that make it foolproof for you to be immune from a few players going down and your season going to hell. But nevertheless, they've had talent on the roster, including Tyreek Hill. And that's before you even put any of this through the filter of what happened at the end of this year with Tyreek Hill, which for me personally is a non-starter as a leader of the team. Because this storyline has been twisted and manipulated to Tyreek Hill took himself out in the fourth quarter. It wasn't the fourth quarter. Look at the snap by snap breakdown of the snaps Tyreek Hill took in this game. The fumble to start the second half with 11 minutes left or whatever it was in the third quarter is the last time you see Tyreek Hill touch the football field. And that's before you get to the mic'd up where Jalen Waddle goes over and asks him if he's done. That they got caught on, or they caught that on the hot mic on the TV broadcast. And then the messaging from all sides, Tyreek throughout the course of this season. I know Chris Kaufman from 3 yards per carry did a great post just this morning, I think, talking about, Tyreek took his shots on this kind of stuff all year long. I know what I've heard about Tyreek throughout the course of this season, and it falls pretty in line with what Chris has apparently heard. There's breadcrumbs here, and I think there's breadcrumbs in how they built this contract. That everybody kind of knew this might be the last hurrah. Otherwise, why would you take a $16 million lump sum check and proration for salary cap purposes and make the player wait another 5.5 months to get the check? Because you don't want to pay money for a player that's going out just to pay money and increase your cash spend and increase your cap proration. It's going to do it for us here on Locked On Dolphins. Hope you guys enjoyed. Tomorrow, Senior Bowl preview. We did the Shrine yesterday. I am getting on a plane tomorrow morning and flying to Dallas. And then all next week, we will be at the All-Star events, have you guys covered. We'll do some stuff over the weekend. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are as well. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate the rest of you for checking out the show. And I'll talk to you all again soon.